I've been on a lot of streams today, and I left Zubaydah's one in frustration because too many people making it impossible to have a dialogue without the others interrupting. So it's been rather wearing, and I wish people who have these streams are better able to control the conversation. So it's not just a shouting match and an entirely unprofitable one, because nobody gets a chance to speak and they don't really get their turn. And the point I wanted to make with this atheist was, well, I suppose what was really so frustrating about it was that he was talking about his personal experience of what he thought was the mind of God. And, well, I was, I'm not interested in these things, and I wanted to talk about something else. Law and politics, which probably he wouldn't have been interested in discussing. But there is an art, I think, to discussing ideas and controlling conversations that not everybody necessarily has. And one of the things that I've noticed about people in particular is that when a certain topic is discussed, they have certain things that they feel they have to say. And basically they repeat themselves and are very boring. And possibly I'm one of those who do the same thing because I'm not really sure if people have heard my shtick or haven't, so I repeat myself, and it gets boring for people who've heard it before. And I wish these discussions are more about dialogue than cries of "Let me finish, please! Let me finish, please! You have interrupted me again." And obviously, the number of people in the stream is a factor, and their behaviour. And you have to take control, and you also mustn't bore your guests repeating what you've said so many times. And it's unprofitable to repeat what you've said every time a certain topic comes up, because people who've heard it before actually won't listen, or they think they know and they don't listen to the end, or they just wait for you to finish while not really listening, and are not listening, yes, so they're just waiting for you to finish so they can speak again. And these dialogues are, well, not very helpful and quite frustrating. And this I suppose is why I enjoy talking to some people more than others. And it depends on why we stream. Obviously, the streamers have a certain interest which they want to share with others. Or are they more interested in being controller of the channel? I've mistitled this. I'm going to say, what shall I title this? I wanted to talk about conversational styles. conversations, dialogues, exchanges, and arguments, discussions, and debates. So was there anything more I wanted to say? I think I am a little tired. But these conversational styles are obviously assertions of status. I just mentioned a person who might stream because they wanted to be the top person. And that might not be enough of a reason to stream. Or they're trying to get things off their chest. Or they're trying to make a point. And if we have a point to make, we should make it quickly. And as we practice making our point, which we can't help but want to when we talk to people online who might have similar interests to us, we will of course ask them, what they want, what they like, what they approve of and what they disapprove of, to find out if somebody is a potential ally or an opponent. And what I want to do is really listen to the other person, but of course if they're bores, then you won't really want to listen to them, and you will be talking over them because you think they're boring or off topic. So what I like are conversations where there is, this is a new term called active listening. And it's a new term. I should look it up. I think I know what it means. Active listening skills. Active listening meaning. Active listening is a practice of preparing to listen, observing what verbal and non-verbal messages are being sent, and then providing appropriate feedback for the sake of showing attentiveness to the message being presented. This form of listening conveys a mutual understanding between speaker and listener. Speakers receive confirmation that their point is coming across, and listeners absorb more content and understanding by being consciously engaged. The overall goal of active listening is to eliminate any misunderstandings and establish clear communication of thoughts and ideas between the speaker and listener. It may also be referred to as reflective listening. By actively listening to another person, as a sense of belonging and mutual understanding between the two individuals is created. Active listening are introduced by Carl Rogers and Richard Farson in 1957. William James identified a variety of potential called the reproduction of the sensation from within. He suggested that people could learn more by engaging this ability directly, reading not merely with the eye, and of listening not merely with the ear, but articulating to oneself the word seen or heard. Ought to deepen one's attention to the latter. I can keep my wandering mind a great deal more closely upon a conversation or a lecture if I actively re-echo myself the words than if I simply hear them, and I find a number of my students who report benefit from voluntarily adopting a similar course. Carl Rogers and Richard Farson coined the term active listening in 1957 in a paper of the same title, reprinted in 1987. In the volume Communicating in Business Today, practicing active listening also emphasized Rogers' 1980 concept of 3 facilitative conditions of effective counseling: empathy, genuineness, and unconditional positive regard. Rogers and Farson write, active listening is an important way to bring about changes in people, despite the popular notion that listening is a passive approach. Clinical and research evidence clearly shows that sensitive listening is a most effective agent for individual responsibility, change, and group development. Listening brings about changes in people's attitudes towards themselves and others. It also brings about changes in their basic values and personal philosophy. People who have been listened to in this new and special way become more emotionally mature, more open to their experiences, less defensive, more democratic, and less authoritarian. Active listening comprises several components by the listener, who must pay attention to what the speaker is attempting to communicate and elicit clarification where necessary for comprehension. Many studies suggest that even the smallest improvements in a person's listening ability can have a noticeable impact on the overall effectiveness of communication and productivity. Developing the skill of active listening can positively impact the speaker's and the listener's mutual understanding and relationship. From the speaker's perspective, listening is a multi-dimensional construct that includes attention, comprehension, and positive intention. I think you get the idea. Hello, Eflin, for you. I was going to finish the stream not having actually finished this entry, but I'll read a few more paragraphs. So here it is: attention, comprehension, and positive intention. Comprehension. The first step in the active listening process is that of comprehension. Comprehension is a shared meaning between parties in communication. This can be done through top-down or bottom-up listening strategies. Top-down listening for comprehension will involve preparing for what message is likely going to be given, attempting to organize what is being communicated, and listening for summarizations or shifts in topic. Bottom-up listening for comprehension will involve an attentiveness to emphasize words such as longer or louder words. In addition, careful attention should be paid to repeated parts of the message being communicated. Attentiveness can be emphasized not just in one's ability to listen, but to listen and respond with sensitivity to particular needs or cultural norms. For example, if you are listening to someone communicate through a disability such as severe long-functioning autism, you will need to pay close attention and forego common methods of organizing information as it is received. In many of today's cultures, comprehension may include knowledge of people using neutral pronouns and preferred pronouns. In order to listen for comprehension, it will be important for a receiver to be aware and understand these cultural norms. Retaining is the second step in the process. Memory is essential to the active listening process because the information retained when a person is involved in the listening process is how meaning is extracted from words. Because everyone has different memories, the speaker and the listener may attach different meanings to the same statement. Memories are fallible. Poor memory retaining techniques like cramming may cause information to be forgotten, as our brains have a limited capacity to process more than one thing at a time. This may be due to the fact that one's brains need more time to effectively process and retain the information given in order to successfully store it in a more solidified form of memory. Retaining information from messages being received is increased with the amount of attentiveness the receiver gives to what is being communicated. For example, information is best retained in adults if the adult has experience in what is being said. Communicates back and forth with another communicator about the topic and maintains visual contact with the source of the message being sent. Responding. There are 3 basic steps for responding in the following order. 1. Paraphrase. Explain what you believe has been said in your own words. 2. Clarify. Ensure you understand what has been said through asking questions. 3. Summarize. Offer a concise overview of what you believe the main points and intent of the message received are. Here are the guidelines to help to fine-tune one's ability to follow these steps. 1. Keep your attention on the message being presented. 2. Refrain from thinking about your own response to what is being presented. 3. Refrain from offering judgment on anything the other person says. 4. Observe non-verbal content. These are their own kind of communication which can be clarified by an active listener. Barriers to active listening. There are a multitude of factors that may impede upon somebody's ability to listen with purpose and intention. These factors are referred to as listening blocks. For example, some examples of these blocks include rehearsing, filtering, and advising. Rehearsing is when the listener is more focused on preparing their response rather than listening. Filtering is when the listener focuses only on what they expect to hear, while tuning out other aspects of what is being said. And lastly, advising is when the listener focuses on problem solving, which can create a sense of pressure to fix what the other person is doing wrong. These are 3 types of barriers to effective listening: environmental, physiological, and psychological. Environmental barriers. Environmental barriers are brought about by the speaker's environment. Some examples include noises, smell, bad cell reception, and any other factors that make it difficult to hear and process information. Sometimes it is due to the language the speaker uses, such as high-sounding and bombastic words that can lead to ambiguity. Other barriers include distractions, trigger words, vocabulary, and limited attention span. Environmental barriers likely cannot be eliminated, but they can be managed. Physiological barriers. Physiological barriers are those that are brought about by the listener's body. They can be temporary or permanent. Hearing loss and deficiencies are usually permanent boundaries. Temporary physiological barriers include headache, earaches, hunger, or fatigue of the listener. Another physiological boundary is the difference between the slow rate of most speech and the brain's ability to process that information. Typically, the brain can process around 500 words per minute, while the average rate of speech for speakers is 125 words per minute. The difference makes it easy for the mind to wander. So reading is faster than... I suppose it depends on what is being communicated. Psychological... Did I say physiological? I should have... Yes, okay, sorry. Psychological barriers. Psychological barriers interfere with one's willingness and mental capacity for listening. Pre-existing biases can lead to listeners to someone else's argument for weaknesses, ignoring its strengths. This can lead to a competitive advantage in a political debate or by a journalist to provoke a strong response from an interviewee, and is known as ambushing. Individuals in conflict often blindly contradict each other. On the other hand, if one finds that the other party understands, an atmosphere of cooperation can be created. Shift response. Shift response is a general tendency of a speaker in a conversation to affix attention to their position. This is a type of conversational narcissism, the tendency of listeners to turn the topic to themselves without showing sustained interest in others. A support response is the opposite of a shift response. It is an attention-giving method and a cooperative effort to focus the conversational attention on the other person. Instead of being me orientated like shift response, it is we orientated. It is a response a competent communicator is most likely to use. Overcoming listening barriers. Anybody in the chat? Well, I'm glad you're listening actively. Effort for you. The active listening technique is used to improve personal communications in organizations. Listeners put aside their own emotions and ask questions and paraphrase what the speaker says to clarify and gain a better understanding of what the speaker intended to say. Distractions that interrupt the listener's attention are one of the major barriers to effective listening. These include external factors such as background noise and physical discomfort, the internal distractions such as thoughts about other things and lack of focus. Another factor or barrier is the use and presence of technology. To continue, an additional barrier is misinterpretation of what the speaker is attempting to communicate, including assumption of motives and reading between the lines, as is premature judgment of the speaker's point, which can occur as a consequence of the listener holding on to a rigid personal opinion on the topic. This problem can be mitigated by asking the speaker what they mean when it is unclear, though it is not guaranteed to work every time. A strong disagreement hinders the ability to listen closely to what is being said. Eye contact and appropriate body languages are seen as important components to active listening, as they provide feedback to the speaker. The stress and intonation used by the speaker may also provide information to the listener which is not available in the written word. Applications. Active listening is used in a variety of situations, including public interest, advocacy, community organising, tutoring, medical workers talking to patients, HIV counselling, helping suicidal persons, management counselling, and journalistic settings. In groups, it may aid in reaching consensus. It may also be used in casual conversation or small talk to build understanding. Active listening plays a large role in the success of a leader. Leaders need to build trust and respect with those around them, and mastering the skills of active listening will help them greatly. A listener can use several degrees of active listening, each resulting in a different quality of communication. These degrees include repeating to indicate attentiveness, paraphrasing to signify understanding, and reflecting to acknowledge perspective and application. The proper use of active listening results in getting people to open up, avoiding misunderstandings, resolving conflict, and building trust. In a medical context, benefits may include increased patient satisfaction, improved cross-cultural communication, improved outcomes, or decreased litigation. Active listening in music, well, we don't really want that. Okay, criticism. A Munich-based marital therapy study conducted by Dr. Kurt Halvik and associates found that even employing active listening techniques in the context of couples therapy, the typical couple was still distressed. Active listening was criticised by John Gottman. The 7 principles of making marriage work as being of limited usefulness. Active listening asks couples to perform Olympic-level emotional gymnastics when their relationship can barely walk. After studying some 650 couples and tracking the fate of their marriages for up to 14 years, we now understand that this approach to counselling doesn't work. Not just because it's nearly impossible for most couples to do well, but more importantly because successful conflict resolution isn't what makes marriages succeed. Oh, isn't it? One of the most startling findings of our research is that most couples who have maintained happy marriages rarely do anything that even partly resembles active listening when they're upset. Robert F. Skooker defends active listening by arguing that a careful reading of the Halbeck study reveals that Gottman cites only certain one-sided results from the study. He also overlooks several important considerations that call into question his implied dismissal of the RE model as a legitimate therapeutic intervention for distressed couples. Oh, I almost wish I hadn't read that, because it does sound a bit dodgy. I thought marriages were about conflict resolution. Alright, I think that's all I'm going to say. Thank you all very much. And I will say goodbye to you now.